It's Wednesday night.
Right?
Matter of fact, yeah, the last Wednesday night of the year for us. That is the Wednesday Night Live. There'll still be a couple more Wednesdays until 2025, but we won't be part of them. So we're this will be the last official one for Wednesday Night Tech Talk Live.
Yeah.
Yeah, for at least 2024.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
but
gonna be nice to have a little 2 weeks off, like 2 weeks off from work, 2 weeks off of everything. So I can focus on car stuff if I want to.
or just yourself stuff.
Right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay, so we're gonna get tonight kicked off. If you haven't noticed the thumbnail, it was more or less we're gonna discuss a year in review. So we're gonna go through the things that happened this year. I don't think there's any snippets to throw up here, but there's definitely some things to talk about that have happened this year. What we've discussed, what we've finished, what we've created, what we've participated in, what we've seen come to fruition. So before we kick it all off, let me run down the list of everybody that's here, and I want to thank you all for coming. Tall Garage actually says, "I actually have a question for tonight." Perfect. Michael Robert Embry is here. Oak Island equals 0. A Blind Frog Ranch equals 5. Okay. Mama M3, Buick 350 V8 Power. Let's see. A Cove. Fab Race Mod Repeat. Hello from Total Obscurity Motorsports Stables. Danny Boyd is in the house. Buff Del Campo. Nick the Van Man is here rattling our cage. I'm sure he's going to have some questions. He likes to ask them about camshaft stuff.
Awesome.
So, yeah. Aunt D is here. Indirect Connection is here. Mr. Famous John Wilburn. So he's here with eyes on the chat.
Nice.
So Blue Grit Garage, Tom Brown, and Clayton's Toolbox. All right, so this is kind of our regular crew that normally jumps in here and gets the ball rolling for Wednesday Night Tech Talk Live. And of course, I can't leave out there's two of them just popped right in. The infamous or famous Junkyard D, however you want to look at it, and then Keith Calitri just swung in here at the last moment. So, we're going to kick it off with a year in review.
I need to do an Oak Island report real quick.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah, I watch it every Tuesday night. And so at 41 minutes, there is either defining on how you count the furs, either a 5 fur or a 7 fur. So they went deep on this one. So 41 minutes, 5 fur or 7 fur. That's it. Still find nothing.
Okay. There's our weekly update Oak Island report where they still found nothing. Okay. And so the year in review. So this year started or is finishing quite well. Last year started off pretty miserable. So I had to take a vacation for the first part of the year. And that's about all I want to say. And then I guess it was March. We started getting things rolling again. And I guess the first thing that came across the plate was one, everybody was, still kind of on the high from No Name Nationals 2023. And, new things were going to be happening, whatever. And there were some new monkey bike rules, right? So for 2024, that was the big things going on. Well, also, if you do remember, like the first few episodes were over on Professor P's channel. We were talking about DLC coated lifters, and that was something that was talked about pretty much almost every week until just about 3 weeks ago. When it came to fruition that DLC lifters were now shipping for every available lifter size. So that was the big news. That was a big thing, because that was literally talked about every week. When are those things coming out? What do they look like?
Couldn't say a word.
Yeah. And we're here. So now you got Comp is shipping out DLC coated lifters that don't fail, right? So you can't really have a lifter failure. If anything, it'll probably be the camshaft failure. But and there we are with that. What was another big thing that came out last year that was kicked down the road the entire season? Well, I guess it'd be the beginning of this year until now.
I think it was basically DLC coded lifters. My bell housing, the small block Ford to 4L60E. I didn't get a flex plate until like just a few weeks ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it took
Well,
9. Well, it was just because of materials. That was the problem, was just getting the correct material in so we could make it. So that took 9 months to get the material to make this flex plates and actually get them SFI approved also.
Let's see. Blue Grit Garage is asking a question. Since the DLC lifters are in, so now with the coated lifters, do we not have to use oil additives?
We're telling everyone to treat them just like you would a regular lifter. So as of right now, just go ahead and treat them like a regular lifter.
So you need to coat them with grease and then put high zinc oil?
Yeah, just break it in, because right now you're not breaking in the lifters anymore, but you still have to do something for the camshaft. High zinc for that, breaking in all your surfaces. It's not just the lifters to the camshaft that have to break in. It's the gear to the cam gear. The chain. I mean, there's many things that really need to break in, that need to transfer material, even the rings. So I would always use high zinc in all those things.
Okay. I was thinking about something that got kicked down the road quite a bit.
Sure.
You know what? One thing was the VRS carburetor. None of
Yeah.
them were available, and it was just like, okay, we're talking about it, we're showing about it, and everybody's like drooling, like, hey, dude, that sounds cool. And then when you actually tried it out, it was a big deal.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is getting it to some people that were actually in our group that people trust. It's one thing if it's just some no name on Facebook, or even on YouTube that gets these carburetors, and they're in the industry. This is what they get paid to do, so they're going to talk it up. They're a talking head for a company. I think giving some carburetors to like a real guy, like we did Andy, and basically just telling him, put them on there. You tell us how they run. And then me talking to him on the sidelines, he's like, should I go through them? I was like, no, just take them out of the box, put them on your car, and I guarantee you they're going to make more power. And he didn't really argue with me, but he couldn't understand how that would work. And then that's, I guess, why he probably didn't want to do it on his very expensive engine at first. I think he was just testing it, and that's why he put it on that 383.
Right.
But it made more power. I think he called me back, and he was just like, yeah. And I was like, well, put them on your tunnel ram now and see what happens.
Let's see. Blue Grit Garage says, sorry, I meant after break-in. No, you don't. You shouldn't have to use any zinc after break-in.
No.
Okay. Max Wedge Dick Dastardly says, tried to do a cold start video, but my throttle cable broke first few pumps.
That
sucks.
Worst. Yeah. You're all set up. Everything's ready to go. You hit record and you're like, I'm getting ready to do a cold start. Breaks. That sucks.
I had the white Ford truck 2 years ago. I did a cold start video because that was like the big thing. When I was here, everybody's doing a cold start video. So I did the fuel injected Ford 393, no chip, nothing. It's just tuned with fuel pressure and adjustable air meter. And dude, I put that sucker together and like hit the key, and it did the first time it didn't have a good cold start. So I don't think I even put up the video. I don't remember. Maybe I did.
Oh, you know what? Don't let me forget this. I actually I got some Predator carburetors. I traded some parts for them. So
you told me that last week.
Yeah, but I actually have them here, so I'll show them to people. So
all right, so that people that have never seen a Predator, huh?
Yeah, what they look like.
Well, A Cove says, if you squirreled away some NOS made in the USA lifters, would you just upgrade to DLC lifters or go with the vintage? That's entirely up to you, man.
Yeah.
I did the squirreled away stuff for a long time, but it was before DLC was available.
Exactly. And that's all these Slant 6s you've been seeing me run are all my squirreled away little lifters that I've been getting, because you buy those lots way back when and they were cheap. They were on eBay. They were, I think I was getting like 25 cents a lifter at that time, because they were just basically boxes were destroyed, but the lifters were still good. And some of them were just in bulk setting. But for me, I'm just going to go with the DLC coated lifter. Yeah. Just because I'm at that point now where I'm getting down to my last, like say 20 or 30 lifters. So I'm just going to go with the DLC.
Well, I'd like to see some people like, before I bet my farm on it, because I can't afford a failure. I'd like to see some other people run them and see what happens and what they do. And you said you were going to do a video where you literally just put together in freaking fire.
Drive. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've already done it, so I know it works.
I just want to see it.
Yeah. Nobody wants to see it. Yeah. But,
No offense. Yeah, I can't bet the farm on it because I mean, it's not something that, I can't afford to have a failure.
No, I get it. And I wouldn't tell people to do that on their own. It's still about setup. It's not just because the lifter is a fix-all. If you have another problem somewhere else, that problem's still going to be there. These are just really good lifters, and to show that is not the problem now. But I guess what I'm getting at is I wouldn't tell people to run them unless I was 100% positive. Well, nothing's 100%, 99% positive that there was not going to be an issue. I've seen the testing on this. I've seen all the, just everything that's been going on with these things for years. The testing. It's not just like this was a month thing. This has been 2 years of testing.
They've made DLC coated lifters now for 15 years, but this is the first time it's just the foot, right? Just that's the face correct. Of the lifter.
Yeah, and that was the hardest part. And that's what cut the cost, is because normally it's the whole thing, and you got to account for that, and that's where it gets really expensive. But with these, it's just the foot. So that was, how do you get the curvature just right? How do you put it in the corner? No flaking, so on and so forth. Technically it's a coating.
Right. Yeah, it's like anodizing. Okay, so and Nick the Van Man says, so frustrated, my van is literally done, no loose ends, just waiting on the drive shaft before I can start it. Sucks looking at it complete, and the curiosity of how it'll sound eating at me. But, hey, dude, guess what? This is the end of the year, so maybe, just maybe you might get that drive shaft before Christmas time or right before New Year's, and you can call it the 2025 van. So, I mean, you're kicking off a whole new year with a whole new set of wheels. So... Keith Calitri said, talk to Ken at Oregon Camps today. He says they reface your old lifters for $550 each. Any thoughts?
Yeah, people do that all the time. And that's actually really good if you have there's some lifters out there that are just, people want the original, hey, I'm going to rebuild the original engine. I've actually done this before. And when I was at Crowder, we used to send lifters out to get them resurfaced and micro polished, because some of those people wanted that style. To me, it's just not, you add that up and you're almost at the cost of a set of DLC coated lifters. Someone sent me what they were at Summit actually just a few minutes ago. I was just talking to Chuck.
Didn't you have a price on them? It's like $197 or something. It's almost $200 for a set of those lifters.
Yeah,
which is really not that bad.
Yeah, let's see here. Just give it a second. It's got to come up. But it was. I'm not going to tell you who it was, but he's a guy who comes in here quite a bit. But yeah, there were. Comp cams, DLC, high energy hydraulic lifters. I think they're on sale right now for like $111. So.
Oh, that's freaking cheap, dude.
Yeah. So. I think there's they got more than 10 in stock. So yeah, I told him just go for it, man. Hit the buy button.
To buy it now. Yeah. Tall Garage says, questions, going to make a cam core on a lathe for a roller cam, or try to. Can I get some ground rules, like the material to start with, and how big should the journals and lobe area be over stock?
Okay. You want to use 8620. You're actually once you make it, there's going to be two things you're going to have to do to it. The first thing after that is you're going to have to get it copper coated. And they're going to copper coat basically the whole thing. This is so when it goes to heat treat, and then it's going to come back, and then you're going to have to grind it to at least just a round lobe. At that point, I would leave about 50 thousandths on everything. So that way, when you send it to the cam company, they can finish grinding because they got better grinders for that, for the actual journals. So just leave it, I would say 50 thousandths. So it's 25 thousandths per side. Then it's going to have to get rough cut, close cut, goes out for heat treating, comes back, and then gets in there. And then they do a finish cut on it. But as far as that, 8620 is what I would use personally, because since it's going to be copper coated, then you can have it reheat treated and recut. So this is like a one-time buy that you can just keep using for years and years and years.
Right, until it gets too small. in diameter. So,
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why you make it as big as possible. That way, when you pick the lobes, tell them how big you want your base circle. So that way you have plenty of future upgrades for it.
so Keith Calitri says, "I'm not trying to save money. Was just wondering what you guys thought of this process." And that's the question about the can the Oregon cams
It works
refacing the
fine.
lifters for $550. See, I'm a big. I don't resurface lifters, right? Like I was not willing to bet the farm. Like I had said about the DLC lifters, like some of this stuff, a Buick camshaft is now like $500 something for a cam. Okay. When I buy cams, I generally buy them used or something that's never been ran, and I get them for a really good price, right? But I've had Professor P custom grind a few before, but I'm not one that's going to go out on a limb to buy $550 cam. I'm not. It's just not going to happen. It's not in my budget, and I won't bet the farm on refacing a lifter. Now, that's how I used to be before COVID. But after COVID, when you couldn't find any lifters and they were like few and far between, and guys were paying $200 to $300 a set for lifters, I would much rather reface a good American quality lifter than buy a Chinese or Indian lifter. I really would.
Agreed.
So that's kind of how I would look at that. So in order of tiering them, an OEM or a good solid American made lifter that's new old stock that you score off of eBay or freaking Amazon, or your buddy had a set or whatever, that's always pick number one. Okay, that's choice number one. Choice number two would probably be resurface a good set of lifters that are American made from the 60s, 70s, 80s. Okay, I would definitely choose that before I would go Chinese Indian lifter. Now, with the DLC coating, we'll have to see, because the jury's still out on that one, in my opinion, because I know those lifters are probably Chinese or Indian made, right? But that DLC coating goes a long way to fixing to crutching up poor quality steel. It seems that way. So we'll see how it goes. I don't know. But I don't even know if comp lifters are made in China or India, but I would assume that they probably would be. Almost anything is made there these days. Okay. Max Wedge Dick Dastardly. I gotta start soon. Gonna freshen up my engine and paint the car with my coffee can of lifters and used cam. Hey, dude, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Yeah. Nick the Van Man says, Professor P, I set my shift cable, did the adjustment how you told me, so much easier and trouble-free than how the instructions wanted me to. Worked out perfectly.
Beautiful. Good.
Let's see. Clayton's Toolbox. Are Howard solid roller lifters good, made in the USA? I'm close to buying them. Okay, here's what I do know about that. Before all of this crazy business with me getting divorced, when I was running the AHRA, we did this thing called I want to say it was Racer's Rep program through Howard's Cams, and it went through their performance line, which was competition products. If you've ever got a catalog from them, that's Howard's Cams. That's their brand stuff, and then they threw everything else in there that they also had to deal with. At the AHRA, they gave you a jobber price discount on anything that they had at competition products. And those Howard's solid roller lifters were one of the things that you could get an instant deal on when that thing started, Racer's Rep program.
Yeah.
Okay. And now if you have AHRA membership before, you're probably still in their computer system as having it, because I have never turned it off. And Lukey B at Howard's, he's never really pressed me to turn it off. But it'll probably, once I start doing something to figure out what I'm going to do, something's going to go one way or the other. Either it's going to stay on or it's going to get turned off. I don't know. I don't know where we stand with that on Howard's. I don't want Howard's to feel like I did them wrong. I didn't really have a choice. But when I remember seeing the price on those lifters, because they were $900 something for a set of roller lifters for a Buick, they were $580, I think, with the jobber price discount. That's a big savings. That's like almost 50%.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And so if you didn't think your AHRA membership for $50 for 1 year ever paid you back, that literally would have paid you for 10 years.
Yeah.
For having the membership. That's how good of a deal some of that stuff was from Howard's Cams.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Crowder one too was like you were buying it for what Summit was buying in the parts too.
Well, the Crowder one, what was cool was it wasn't a set number, right? It was like whatever you guys got for markup, we got like almost all the markup off.
That's right.
And so some of the stuff was like significant cheap, know. And it just depended what you bought. Because I remember buying a flat tappet cam and lifters. There's probably not a lot of money to be made on a flat tappet cam and lifters, because I didn't save much. I mean, it was probably 40% off, right? Which is still like, you're talking $140. I think I paid for the cam and lifters, but it just didn't cost a lot of money. Now, if I would have bought like a Crowder custom made camshaft, man, that would have been a freaking ticket right there. That would have been the e-ticket, dude. Because that would have been $500-$600 off
savings,
$1,500 cam. Yeah. But let's see. Max Switch, Dick Dashley. When I win the lottery, I'm getting a roller cam and lifters and trick flow 270 heads. Everyone has a dream. Let me tell you something here that it took me a long time to put this together. When you're talking race performance parts, okay. Here's the difference between a roller cam and lifters and a good set of heads than having a set of heads made and then just buying an off-the-shelf camshaft. Okay. The off-the-shelf camshaft, let's just say you bought a, just to compare kind of apples to apples here. If you're buying a set of Trick Performance factory heads, okay, you're probably buying a hydraulic or maybe even a solid flat tappet cam. Okay. That's kind of what you're looking at. And generally what you find is when you buy an off-the-shelf cam kind of just works broad, okay? It's not narrowed for your application. And this is what I always hated about buying and building stuff off the shelf. I mean, you can do it. It's just you have to have an understanding of what those parts are going to do, right? Where I get that from is like the Ford. The letter cams used to be the hot ticket, right? Like, 302 Ford, you throw a cam in it or a B cam or an E cam or whatever you got, right? The alphabet cams. And the E cam with the 2500 stall converter was like the ticket. But if you've got a 2500 stall converter from TCI, was different if you got a 2500 stall converter from Boss Hog, right? It was completely two different things. And that's where you had to understand what off the shelf was really doing for you. So what I'm getting at though is you buy that cam, lifters, and you got your factory set of heads. Okay. You finally buy your good set of heads, your Trick Flow 270, put them on there, and you're going to realize that hydraulic flat tappet cam does no longer meet your needs, right? Because it's like I said, it's broad. It doesn't give you the 60 foot that you expected, and it definitely doesn't deliver the top end that you wanted. Right. But it falls kind of in the middle. It's a shotgun. When you shoot a piece of paper with a shotgun, there's a lot of holes in it, but none of them are really dead center. Right. So, but when you buy a roller cam that's custom made and designed for your application,
it's everything.
There's like 2 or 3 tenths in performance right there.
Yeah.
Okay. And it'll cover that other camshaft leaps and bounds. Same way when you buy the heads.
I have one. Remember the guy? He had the blue Fox Body Mustang, the baby blue one up at Verona. He had a cam. Someone built him an engine. He had a cam in there, and the car was running.
Was that older guy, that Larry Sweet, that I used to pit next to all the time?
Exactly. So he was running 760s, and I know the person who built that, and I told them that cam was wrong for it. It was like all over the map. It was completely not even the right thing. So I told him to spend the money and let me cut him a custom cam. Well, I made him a custom cam. He went into the 690s with just the cam change. Then after he was making the power, then by that point, we started fixing the chassis. So with the cam change and the chassis, he got down into the 660s, 650s. So that was it. Cam change, we got into the 6s, and then Then the rest he picked up. So basically, with the cam change and some tune-up, he picked up almost a full second, or just over a full second. In the 8th mile, this is 8th mile now, full second.
Right. That's a huge difference in the quarter mile. But
Yes.
that's just to say how off your combination can be with off-the-shelf stuff.
Yep.
And that's, that's what's sad about it. The good thing about roller cam and lifters, you buy them once. Generally, you buy them once.
That's
Okay.
right.
Your combination can be built around that camshaft for pretty much the rest of the time. But same way with the heads. The money, the best money spent, I'm telling you right now, buy the cheapest cam you can get, buy the most wicked head you can buy, and then change the cam later.
Yeah.
The best head that money can buy is the best way to go. And if it's got too big of valves for your combination, maybe you should look at a different combination. But heads, it's the best money spent. Okay. 38 Racing. Here's a Driveline tech question. Will there be troubles running an offset pinion location? Probably 2-inch offset with a 36 by 40-inch long drive shaft.
No, just use the 2-inch offset as your angle instead of the angle being on your pinion like down, this. Yeah, just have your offset. That's actually what I did on this car because this is, Chrysler's, that's how they do it anyways. So when I put a Ford 9-inch, it offset it that way. So I have them less than half a degree, but then I use the offset from the actual pinion as because you need a little bit so that way the grease rotates, so you can rotate some grease in there.
Well, and that's how Fords were, the 9-inch Ford. That's why the pinion is generally offset.
But that's it. Exactly. That's what I compensated for on this car when I put it in the Cookie Monster. Yeah.
Yeah, it probably won't be an issue whatsoever. But like you're saying, you want to make sure that offset you normally have top to bottom is now side to side, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So, okay. And that might be your transmission tunnel is just a little bit too narrow now.
Sometimes it is.
Yeah. Let's see here. Oh, Bobby Frizzell showed up here.
Oh, tell me what's up.
Yeah.
What's up, man?
And Bobby's saying off-the-shelf cams suck, and when you go to custom cam, you never go back. Exactly. I'm telling you, where I realized this, was way back in early 2000, late 99, 2000. I was big into the Fun Ford Weekend stuff. And the guys had factory stock. They had a factory stock class, and you had to use factory mass production pieces in this factory stock class. So 302 Ford block, and it had to be 302. So it couldn't be bigger than a 306, which is 30 over, right? Had to be a factory mass produced head, had to be a factory mass produced intake, and the camshaft had to be factory part number. So what they were building was a 302 with an Explorer set of GT40P heads, the 1.7 roller rockers off the Cobra, and then you got a Cobra or Explorer intake manifold. The camshaft was the E cam, and then you put them big, tall 1.7 rockers on it with the 1.7 ratio. Well, some guys figured out if you take the E cam card and you have one ground at, say, a custom cam manufacturer like Comp or Crowler, and you give them that grind, hey, man, I want an E Motorsports cam. Here's the lift, the duration, all the whole jazz. Put it together. And when they put you together a solid roller that's got a copper core, the billet core blank, you picked up 10 horsepower over the other camshaft just because all the lobes were consistent. Okay. And the other thing was the flexibility of the core went down significantly. Right? It didn't flex like the cast iron core Ford cams would because they're meant for mass produced. It's essentially a factory engine with a camshaft in it. So, but that was another 5 to 10 horsepower, guys, we're assuming was the flex. And literally that cam would pass because it's legitimately that profile. It's just a better core and a better, it's not mass produced and it's not within plus or minus 2000s tolerance or 3 degrees or whatever it was. There were consistent lobes all the way across. So, but yes. So custom cam, big time difference, especially when you got a whole combination already set up and you got something that works. And when you're trying to change the cam and you make that combination still work, but yet gain more on the top and more on the bottom, that's where the custom cam comes into play. That's where you find that extra 15 to 20 horsepower. So if you're looking at that, the Triple Crown class, you should be looking at custom camshaft regardless.
100%.
Yeah. Okay. Nick the Van Man says, tech tip: if you buy an off-the-shelf cam grind, I've had the best luck by seeing what cam I think I need and pick the one that's one size smaller than the one I think I need.
I've been saying that since we've been doing this. Always pick the smaller cam. You'll be happier.
We said that many times. It's like you're much happier with a better head and the smaller cam.
Agreed.
Because
it'll make the better head will make that cam work in a bigger aspect.
Broader. Yeah, it'll be broader. So if it says it's like $1,500 to $5,000, it'll probably be $1,200 to I don't know, $5,500, somewhere around there. It'll make it each one broader just because the head flow is that much better.
Yeah, it doesn't fall off. It just carries the torque out. Since you can't measure horsepower, it's just as long as you can keep that torque in there in a higher RPM, mathematically you'll make more horsepower.
Let's see. Okay. Max Wedge Dick Dashley says a guy was running 1040s with with his Max Wedge with worked on Max Wedge heads. He put trick flow heads on out of the box, ran 10.0s.
Yeah, because it's quality air. That's the difference. It's just the high velocity. Yeah, it's good stuff.
All right. 38 Racing says, how will that affect the suspension tune with having his pinion offset?
Nothing.
Yeah, it shouldn't do anything at all.
Nothing at all.
Oh, Mohawk 62 is out of here. All right, buddy. See you later. All right.
Man. See you next year.
Okay, 38 Racing says 333 question. The LS is acceptable on a 78 or newer GM if carbed, right? So we kicked that around for a while, and we got rid of the 78 and newer. It's just a GM engine. It'd be like no difference if what we would have to do is like you'd have to do the same thing to the Mopar running the Gen 3 Hemi. You'd have to do the same thing to anything Ford made after actually all the Fords would be fine because you can't run a modular. So, or a Coyote, because it's got to be push rod. But the reality is that you can run an LS in any one of them. It does have to be carbed. It has to have a carburetor on it. But we also did discuss this. It can also run the factory computer for the ignition control.
Yeah.
Let's see. Stephen Hote says 333 question. 351 Cleveland legal. Yep, bring it, dude.
Which is the 351s that is it the M? That's the one that's not legal?
No, they're all legal.
But isn't that like a 400 though?
No, there's a 351 modified as well. And then there's a 400 modified.
Oh, okay. Okay, got it.
Yeah. And the 400 modified is technically like a 400 Cleveland, really.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's too many big cubes. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next thing for this year's recap, the new rule changes to monkey bike came out at the beginning of the year, and I think it kind of reinvigorated the monkey bike and kind of took the genie out of the bottle. You let the genie out a little bit so that people could expressly run the monkey bike class.
It's fun.
Yeah, and it got a little hairy this year. Plus, the bikes were a lot faster.
Well, yeah, but it was designed to run half track. It was designed to run 330, but since there was no timers at the 330,
they ran it out the back door.
They ran out the back door, but the idea was to make them really fast for this short of a period, not to keep them going that fast. So that's why it got hairy. I really would like to have the timing at the 333 mark and make that like the hard stop. Even if we just had someone standing there, you would tell who was going to win with the camera. I think that's what we should do next time because, that would be, yeah.
Let's see. Nick the Van Man says, I got a free engine this week, a 2010 Ford 4.63 valve with 150K on it, ran great. Do they make a carburetor intake manifold for the 3V? And then before we got to answer, Andy from Unity Motorsports Garage says, Nick, you can get a 3V tunnel ram if they still sell it. And I mean, if you're going to build, I know you're not going to build anything for the Triple Crown class here because it's not a push rod engine. Yeah. But the deal is there's a lot of power to be made by a 3-valve. Matter of fact, those modular Fords are that's what makes the Coyote so deadly is all the years of development of the modular Ford. And I know that they were doing. There's carbureted intake manifolds for the 2, the 4, and I believe there's 3. Andy's saying there's a tunnel ram, but I think there's a single 4-barrel 4150 flange for all 3. So a 2 valve, a 4 valve, and the 3 valve.
Wow.
And I do know that they make one for the 351 or the 331, the 5.4 modular as well. Okay. Levi's Backyard Performance says, hey, I also said I was going to sponsor AMC car. So if you're okay with guaranteeing that you'll be there or you'll pay it back, then hit me up. This is for the 331. It's okay. So it's the 333 and it's the Triple Crown is what we're going to call it from now on. But I guess at 333, it's kind of stuck to it.
No.
Yeah. And, Levi, if you're not there this year for No Name Nationals, I mean that's the only time we're going to run this whole thing is at the No Name Nationals this year. Let's see. Okay, 38 Racing is saying this 333 is getting closer to something I can throw together. Won't be the fastest, but there might be a car from my area. Hey, you know what? That would. The whole idea wasn't to be the fastest, but the whole reason we're doing this. Okay, I'll show you. Professor P and I we chat every day, right?
Yeah.
Every day.
And
it wasn't even 2 weeks ago. It was like a week ago. Wait, is it this week maybe?
Yeah, it was this week. You sent me pictures.
Sent him a text. Okay. Yeah. I was shopping on Marketplace. Let me see if I can find it.
It's to show you how cheap some of these cranks were. Like, this is a crank, what he's going to show you that, let's just say a few years ago, or maybe 10, 15 years ago, this crank would have been out of control.
Oh, dude, you won't even believe this now. Okay, so I'm going to John Wilburn this. But he's right. Go ahead and finish what you're saying. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no. That was almost done. I was going to say this crank was, unbelievably priced way back then. But now, go ahead. And then I was just leading you into that.
Okay. So every single race combination these days is built with a performance crankshaft that's forged steel crank. All right. What we were trying to do was build you a class that, since everyone's forgotten about the small cubic inch engines and they go after this Chinese and 4-inch stroke cranks or 4 1/8-inch stroke crank, and they're all over them and they'll dump all the other cranks to the curb.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you the opportunity to build an engine that's less than $2,000 that's hairier and shit. That was the idea. We wanted you to run like a good number for very little dollars, and people are overlooking. They're focused on something completely different, and they're forgetting what's good. Okay, so the first thing was I sent this to Professor P. This is a crankshaft kit. You can't quite. Let's see if I can get this thing to not be so bright.
Maybe I could. What do you talk about? I'll see if I can pull it up.
Okay, this is the crank. I sent Professor P a crank from Marketplace. This is a 327 small journal forged steel crank from Chevrolet. Okay. It needs to be turned 1010. It was $100. It's now $75 because no one's buying it. $75 for a forged steel capable of about 900 horsepower crankshaft for $75 freaking dollars. Okay, that's $2,000 off your engine budget right there that we just saved you by doing this 333 class, and it allows you to pick this stuff up for nothing.
See if I can get it. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. So that is on Marketplace right now. 327 small journal crank. It needs to be turned 1010. You could literally build a 333 class motor. That's what the whole point of this was for. And the heads I sent him. Yeah, the heads I sent him was another picture. It's a set of $700 Dart Pro 1 heads, I think is what they're for, right?
Yeah.
That's the cast iron, or that's the cast aluminum head from Dart that used to be the ticket 10 years ago for Chevrolet small block. You could make probably 550, 600 horsepower with a 327 with just using that crank and that set of heads, and you have $800 in the whole setup right now.
Yeah.
Right. Which is like me and Professor P. What engine part did you buy that was $800 or less?
When?
What for your car right now? For what's on your car at this exact moment has an engine part that's $800 or less?
I couldn't even tell you. I don't think there's. On this one right here, there's everything's over that.
Right. That's what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm.
I think my set of headers was 660, and that was just the headers, right?
Oh,
This
yeah.
was 10 years ago. So they're probably at least 800 now.
Yeah, my headers were about $800 back in 2006.
So what I'm getting at here is you got the crank and a set of heads for less than the cheapest part on our entire engine combination.
Yeah.
That was the idea, was to put the frugality back into it where anybody could compete. It's not based on money. And then without having all the big cubic inches, if somebody does come in and spend a gargantuan zillion dollars,
You're gonna know.
well, one, you're going to know, but two, they're probably only going to have about 10 to 15 more horsepower than you. Because the cubic inch is so small, the gain is so minimal, right? That's the idea. And the more cubic inch we give them, the easier it is to outrun anybody on a budget. And that was the idea. That's why we wanted to limit the cubic inch size, because the bigger it gets, the faster they outrun you.
That's right. And that's why also too I put the tire limit at 3,000 pounds, so there was no advantage of going light, small cubic inches, because then the RPMs go up. There's no advantage because now you're on a small tire that's hard, and you're just not going to get the bite you would with a larger tire that could be softer.
Junkyard D, will there be any changes for the monkey bike rules for 2025? I don't know. I haven't heard anything about it, so I'm assuming that's a no. But we won't know until the 27th of December when John announces everything.
Yep, that's it. Go make sure to be on John Wilburn the Friday after Christmas on his channel. He'll know.
So Andy says, I'm probably the reason mod motors are being banned. No, not at all.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why we did the mod motor being banned is I cannot see any possible way of running a mod motor for a reasonable price. You got to buy 2 cams or 4 cams or whatever, and then it's not an even keel. You're not comparing apples to apples anymore. You're comparing apples to oranges. But you just run that Windsor and you'll be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we did that just to keep it too budget friendly, because then people would just go out there and get the hammer and RPM to death.
We talked about the hammer, and the hammer was okay. If you were to bring something that was going to knock everybody's rocker off, it's the 4V modular Ford. It's a Coyote that you can literally just run all over everybody, right? Because it fits the cubic inch.
That's right.
That's the thing. And you can make a 331 modular run with anybody, and it fits right in the middle of the class. So let's face it, if you showed up with a 5.4 modular or even a 4.6 stroker setup in a Fox body Mustang, you'd pretty much own everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see what else we got. Something garage says I'm going with 351 Cleveland in my 65 Mustang. That's going to work just perfectly.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why we did this. And I'm glad that we opened it up to the bigger cubic inches, is for that reason right there. 65 Mustang, 351 Cleveland. That was like every car that was street racing that I was around. So it's perfect.
Let's see. 38 Racing says, I bet that crank isn't close to me. Let me see where it's at. I'll pull it up. I just had that thing.
While you're doing that, Mama M3 says the Mopar tax is real, guys. No, it's really not. While he was doing that, I've been doing the Mopar searching, and 318, you can get a whole early 1970 318 for like $200. That's a short block. That's steel crank. That's good, decent rods and a decent block. And then I found some used W2s. I think they were like probably $500 or $600. And so basically for under $1,000, you have heads, you have a decent crank, some heavy rods. You could do some lightning to them. And then you just need to get some pistons at that point. So basically, that's a heavy hitter right there at that point.
So, 38 Racing says, I bet that crank isn't close to me. This thing's in Summertown, Tennessee, which I don't know where that's at, but it may not even be too close to me, but it is in Tennessee. And don't think that because it's in Tennessee and I'm in Tennessee that's close, because Tennessee is literally like 8 hours across, right?
Longer. It's long, man.
It's near Columbia. It's actually not too far from me. So, 327 steel crank. There you go. Tall Garage says, guys, why are we talking about buying cranks and billet cams for a new class? Where we're worried about people out buying the other guys, but no one has money that is going to show up. I don't know. I don't care. I'm not getting what this is asking me.
Yeah.
All it is says, all we said was get a custom cam for your combination.
Completely separate from the 333 class. Yeah.
Right. But if you were running the 333 class, you should be running a custom cam that's tailored to your combination.
Yes.
If you want to get the most out of it, it's worth probably 30 more horsepower and 30 foot-pounds of torque. Easy. Cranks is, I mean, what are you starting with? You can start with whatever you want. You can run whatever you want. Right.
Yeah.
But the whole idea was we build a class around something that was a cheap combination that you could put together for almost nothing, and a $75 crankshaft that's forged steel. That's the ticket.
That's
I mean, why would you pass that up?
Yeah, and I've been doing this, and each time I go to, when I was in Texas for Thanksgiving, I was looking in that area. When I was in Minneapolis, I was actually looking in that area too, just to see how much stuff. And those things are everywhere. It's not like it was just for this area. Every place I've been, and even when I stopped to get something to eat, I would just look. I would locate that area, look for cranks and rods, and it's everywhere. So they can be found.
So 2Hack says he bought a small journal 3-inch stroke crank, factory steel. So it's a forged steel crank for it's probably a 283 Chevy crank from Power Pack engine, machined with Clevite bearings, $125. That's what we were telling you, was that the short stroke stuff, everyone is overlooking it because they don't care about it anymore. Yep. And the bang for the buck is tremendous, right? The reason why these steel cranks are still running around is because they're freaking strong, right? And for the price, you can't beat it. You can't get some Chinesium crank that's going to outrun this 3-inch stroke 283 crank. You can't. They don't make them that good. That's made with quality American steel.
Not just that too, but the oiling going from the mains to the rods on the some of the China cranks. I saw it quite a bit when I was at PRI, just how they're drilling the holes from the mains going to the rods. It's not very good at all. And especially the timing of the oiling holes and how the timing is being timed to the rods. It's just not right. So Chevrolet had it correct in the actually Pontiac did first, then they brought it over to Chevrolet. And all through the 60s, 70s, 80s, they had the best oiling system. So I would go with the older crank 100% for RPM.
Bobby Frizzell says, I'm an FE guy. I can't buy valve covers for $100. I feel for you, brother. Like my Buick stuff, you cannot buy. There's only like 2 manufacturers for valve covers, and that none of them are less than $500.
That sucks.
That's why I make my own. Let's see. Something Grind says, what AMC engine do we have to use? I know where there is a Gremlin. You don't have to use any specific engine. You just have to keep it less than 368 cubic inches. But it's 9 pounds per cubic inch for the class. So you just have to keep it less than 368 cubic inches. It's got to be more than 300 cubic inches. So you could use a 304 AMC. You could use a 343 AMC. What's another one that they had? Did they have anything else that falls in there?
316. No.
Did they make a? No. That was Studebaker made it 327.
Yeah, I think it was a 304 and a 360. Wasn't that it?
Oh, they did make the 360 that falls in there. They make a 343 as well.
Yeah, so, they make a 360.
Yeah, you can use any one of those engines and put it in that Gremlin. It just has to weigh accordingly. And then that 360 can't be something that's it can't be a 60 over combo. It'd have to be like 40 over at the most. Okay, 38 Racing says, I'm thinking about a $2,000 budget. That's a good budget for a pretty decent build. It's $2,000, because if you can get in the motor for like less than $1,000, you can get the training for another $200, and then if you score the right car, you could be in there for $2,000 pretty easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me and Dallas were throwing that around costs. If you've already got the car and everything is already working, we were thinking about $2,000 to $3,000 to build this engine. In fact, we are almost this close to making it a claimer class.
Yeah,
don't say anything.
Yeah, but with YouTubers, it's tough about the claimer class, because what happens is this, let's say you get Dylan Levi builds a car for a 333 Triple Crown class, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's working on it all year to make it to No Name National, and then somebody claims him, and he
Yep.
doesn't even get to run the car.
Exactly.
His viewers are going to be pretty dang mad.
Yeah,
you know?
that's why we were this close to doing it. But it would have to be after the race, you know. I don't know.
Let's see. Max Wedge Dick Nationally says, good racing header for mine is $1,500. I paid $300 for my cheap headers. And there's nothing wrong with, like, the way I look at it is this class was kind of intended for the budget-minded person that wanted to get into racing to run a true heads-up class. Because a heads-up class, that generally what you find is the money it takes so much to run heads up that you can't even afford to dip your toe in the pool, right? And the good thing about this Triple Crown class is that you could literally open up Facebook Marketplace, buy the parts that you need, spend money on good machine work, and there's a well thought out combo, and you could be in the top tier of the whole thing. I mean, a 327 Chevrolet 30 over, well, let's face it, is probably going to be one of the easy combos to build. The other one is going to be 331 Ford, based off of Windsor. Another one would be like the early 331 Hemi, right? Isn't that what we talked about?
331, yep. And then the I think, but that would just be finding parts for that. I think the 318, 40 over 318 would probably be one of the better ones to do, because an early block, 318 block, anything in the 60s would easily go to a 4-inch bore. And you're right there at the number that you want to be. That means you can run a lighter combination. It'd still be good.
Dylan Levi, does anyone make a mod motor carb intake? I've never seen one. Yes, there used to be, when the LS came out and they were making the carbureted intakes for the LS, there was just as many carbureted intakes for the mod motors. It's just they weren't that big of a ticket because they're hard to swap. A mod motor is wider. It's as wide as a 460 forward, which is humongous. You need a lot of engine bay for that.
Yeah. It didn't have very good distribution. You would need twin carbs for that to make it work better.
Well, that was the first one I saw was the either a twin carb or a tunnel ram setup.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Heavens Mopar says the deals are out there. I got a 7340 rebuilt short block and heads last summer for $2,000 with new headers. Forged crank is being assembled now with complete tunnel ram setup. I got for $850. So, dude, yeah, it sounds like you're gonna have something to run for this Triple Crown class if you want.
Yeah, I'm trying to get is a Scott Speed Shop. I'm trying to get him over there because he's got that 340 with the tunnel ram and the W2 heads in that Duster. Sounds pretty nasty. I've been talking to him. I was like, dude, it's running now, so that way at the beginning of the year you can get it all sorted out, and then I can see you out of Triple Crown. And he goes, there's so many people trying to get me to race that, and I was like, you should do it, man. Why not? It'd be fun.
Yeah, what do you got to lose? I mean, it's just a fun class.
That's the whole idea.
Val 360 Jimmy says, hey guys, I've been watching on my lunch break. Just wanted to say thanks for the info and entertainment through the year. Enjoy your Christmas, and I'll watch the rest later when I get home. Hey, thanks, buddy. I appreciate you. You used to be a regular on here, and I think maybe you're working now. It sounds like during our show. So, but we appreciate you on here. So, yeah, thanks for the thumbs up, and you have a very Merry Christmas with you and your family as well.
Thanks, man. Yeah, you too.
Let's see. Dylan Levi says custom cams are usually not over $500. If you're working with a 2,000 budget, that's cheap. And like Dallas said, cam's important, but don't forget torque converter. Your torque converter, all right, if you're running an automatic, the torque converter is probably one of the most important combinations to make the whole thing work, right? You got to have the right converter in it. You can't buy off the shelf. When you're talking a full race heads up application, because think about it, heads up means, one, you can't leave anything on the table. Even if you're working with junk, you got to take every little advantage that you can. Torque converter is a big one when you're talking small cubic inch in a fairly, think about it, streetable, heavier car. That's what the whole intent is, right?
And when you buy your converter too, ask the converter company, especially if it's one that you're kind of really I don't use the word custom, but you're kind of getting one that's custom made for you. Some of them will allow you a send back and a recut for free. So what they
call the tightening or loosening of the converter.
Yes, They'll tighten it or loosen it so you can get out there and get your 60-foot time, see what you're running before, and then just kind of get some shift points. You'll know if it's right or not because it'll be right. And just see if they do that kind of stuff because that's definitely worth its weight in gold there too. And that's the reason why we're doing these rules as soon as possible, so you guys can get out there right there in April. Build your cars now, get them in April, get at least 2 or 3 months under your belt, and then that way you're ready to go.
I think I'm going to try. I don't know what I'm going to do yet this year. Let's see. So, Bobby Frizzell, Levi got a mod motor and an intake, was going to put it in a truck, but I just can't fall in love with the mod motor. And that's what you find with most guys. Like me and Bobby Frizzell are probably about the same age. Our generation was staunch, like 5-liter. Like, you got to think, in the 80s and the early 90s, there was only 2 real performance cars. The Camaro didn't even count. It didn't even count. It was not even fast. And everything had the 7.5-inch rear end in it. So the second you even thought about putting slicks in it, the fucking pinion would fall right out of that 7.5, right? Like, I mean, like literally you didn't even bolt slicks on it. You just thought about it. The Mustang and the Grand National was like the 2 muscle cars from the 80s and early 90s. If you didn't have a Grand National, you had a Mustang or a 5-liter something, right? I was always like in my own path, but 5-liter Cougar and Thunderbird was cool. I always thought was different because nobody expected them. But nobody really gravitated from the 5-liter to the mod on the street. And I say that, I mean, I don't know how Andy was. I know Andy loves the mod motors, but I think he went right to racing them. On the street, they were not, you got to think about what they came in. The first 2 things that came in was a truck and a Crown Victoria, okay? And they were both heavy. And then when you got in and you drove one compared to a 302, if you've ever driven a fuel-injected 302, they don't have any torque. And then you put a mod motor in there, it's even worse. It's like half the torque that the 302 had. So it was not like something that you wanted in a daily driver. Now, it got better over the years because from 92, 3, 4 in the Crown Vic, they were anemic as crap, but they got really good mileage. And then in like about 99 or 2000, they came out with these PI heads, which was the performance improved. And it opened up the intake runner significantly. And it improved flow. Yeah. And it was like, I want to say it was like a 30% improvement in power.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a big deal. And really where that came from was like around the same time, 99 or 2000, Ford got hammered with this lawsuit selling Cobras that were supposed to be like 270 horsepower. And people were buying them. And then they'd take them, have them dyno tested, and they'd make like 200 horse. Right. And they were overrating it so that they could sell more.
Yeah.
And they got hammered. And I mean big time hammered lawsuits. And then those PI heads came out. And I think that's because they wanted to undersell and over deliver, right, is what they wanted to do. But they were doing the opposite of that.
Exactly the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. There's a local guy who has been able to go 10s in a car that's capable of 9s, and he's tried several sets of heads, carbs, etc. He stopped paying attention at the back of the block. Okay, I don't know what that means. All right. Indirect connection says the factory crank in the poly is pretty good, but the rods are the weak link. Exactly. What rods would you recommend? Stock 331 or 358 stroke 360 crank turned down? No, that poly's got a steel crank in it, I do believe.
It does. It does. I would go with, I wouldn't turn down a 358 crank personally. I would just stay with a 331. I'd rather have the bigger bore, shorter stroke for what we're doing here because it's going to be about 4,000 RPM and up. That's just my opinion. But I would run that poly crank.
Yeah, I'd run the poly crank, and I would put probably. Didn't they have when Mopar came out with the 340 TA motors? Didn't those TA motors have their own TA rods?
Yes, but they were.
Did you buy those?
No, yeah, but they're heavy. See, that's the problem.
Oh, are they heavy?
Yeah, they're heavy. I would just go a different route. I would get some factory 318 rods and then just take off the pads. I've done this before too.
Oh, yeah. You just take what do they call that?
Lightning.
Where
You just lighten the rod.
well, you use the sanding roll and you take off all of the casting flash on them, and it
Yeah.
takes the
Well, these on the
they
Chryslers,
call
they
them
have
relieving the rod. Is that what it is? I don't know. Stress
stress
relieving the
relieving.
rod.
Yeah, stress relieving. So yeah, on the Chryslers, they have these huge like metal disc flat pads at the top and at the bottom. That's for like quick balancing, so that way they can hit it on the belt sander, get them close and get them done. If you take that off on the both the top and the bottom of the rod, and then you stress relieve it, and then you basically have it shot peened yourself, you can do all this stuff and clean it up, and then wait and get the rods. You can get probably 100 grams off the rod, maybe 150 grams off that rod, and it's not going to hurt it at all because it's actually going to be stronger and it's going to be lighter, so it's going to RPM better. And then that way too, you're let's just say you get an older, like a one that's like internally balanced or 18, like one of the later versions of it. I'm sorry, externally balanced. It could be light enough to where you say you get a cast crank 331. It might be light enough to where you have it internally balanced. You might not have to add Mallory metal to it at that point.
Well, so stock eliminator used to require like it had to be stock. You couldn't run an aftermarket rod or anything like that, right? And these guys were making 500 horsepower or something that was intended to be like 190 horse.
Yeah.
And the way they did it was because they couldn't buy an aftermarket rod, they would do stress relieving on the rod, and then they would stress relieve, balance, and then shot peen the rod.
Yep.
And that would take a lot of the stress out of the rod to where it wouldn't come apart. And there was nothing saying you had to use a stock rod bolt. So most everybody ran an ARP bolt.
Yeah,
so you could make a set rod.
Yeah.
What's that?
You run the ARP wave lock.
That's what I did. Well, and that's you're probably, for this class, I would say you're probably going to be good with a stock set of rods. You just find the lightest weight stock rod you can get and start there. But that's probably going to be the best. But I mean, I don't know. If you know somebody around your area that runs stock eliminator Mopars, I would hit them up and see what stock rods they run. They may be able to run an aftermarket, but they may have been doing this long enough that they remember what rod to run. It might be like a 68 318 rod out of a police car, but those are easier to score than some freaking set of $3,000 rods.
But nowadays though, you can get, God, no, I hate to say this, but you can get a decent set of H-beam rods that are lighter than the factory rod for about $300. So
Yeah.
is it worth all the thing? But if I'm going to run a factory rod, let's just say it this way: if I had the factory rods already, they were in the block that I bought, the 318 that I bought, I would use those rods because I could cut them down and basically it's just time in the garage, making them lighter, making them weigh the same.
I'm going to do something here that I've done before in the past. This is something I like doing because, see, my Buick stuff, nobody makes anything, so I have to think my way around all this stuff. All right, and I'm not even thinking of it the right way on this. All right, if you're building an engine for this 333 Triple Crown class, okay, and let's say you're going full out, you want to get everything you can out of it with budget in mind. All right. And you've already relegated yourself to, I'm going to use a set of W2 heads for a small block Dodge, and then I'm going to figure out everything else from there. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, the longer the rod you run in this engine combination, the better it's going to run. Okay. Yeah. And that means, like, what is a stock Mopar 318 rod? Is it 6.125? Is it 6 and 8? Okay. Mm-hmm. So then you already got a fairly long rod, which is actually really good. The problem is going to be if you go with that fairly long rod, that 6.125 inch long rod, you can use a stock style piston, which is perfect for budget friendliness, 100%, because you'll be able to put something together for about maybe $1,000. Okay. If you take it the next step up and you're like, okay, I'm going to use this poly crank and I'm going to do a custom rod and then try to use an off-the-shelf piston. First, you need to find a piston that will work, okay? And I'm not talking about, it's not going to have anything the same except for the bore. And that's what you're looking at is the bore needs to be the bore capable of the block. Now that poly, that thing can handle, it can go to a 4-inch bore or 4040, just like a 340. It's got so much cylinder wall. And that's exactly what I would do. I would open it up as much as I could. And then I would hard block the block. And then have all your machine work done to it. But then I would identify a rod. Okay, so the easiest way to identify a rod is, let's say you find a piston and you find out 4040 that's a LS 6.2 liter piston that you can use, and it's got some weird metric wrist pin that's like, not metric, but like just weird size. So it's like 0.941 wrist pin size, okay, which is different than a Mopar small block, which was what, probably 990. Is that what they got, the big wrist pins? I think
big, huge ones. Yeah.
Yeah. So the good thing is, you losing all that mass on the wrist pin means it'll rev quicker. It'll probably rev higher. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you how I find rods. If you want to go outside, think outside the box and find a set of rods that is not your norm, we're going to do that right now. So let's pull up. Okay.
And so someone just texted me while you're pulling that up. If I were to do this, I wouldn't look for the W2 personally. I would be looking for like a Magnum head. They flow better than, like, to say, the factory heads. But I would try to look at getting some aluminum like Magnum heads if you're trying to do it budget friendly, like those RT ones that came out there.
Okay, well, right now I'm looking at eBay, right? So here's how I do eBay. The reason why I go to eBay is because what happens is a lot of those leftover NASCAR parts that never get run end up being on eBay. So Roush Yates will sell them on eBay. There's a couple other guys. It's like Quick Performance or Quick Parts. They sell it on eBay as well. So we'll just check it out on eBay, right? So what do we got here? Okay, this is how I do it. So you want to get a longer rod. So it needs to be longer than 6.125 inch rod. So 6.400 rod. Okay, that's all you type. All right, so now you're going to get push rods. And you can see that right up front, right? But here's new NASCAR Pankel connecting rods, 6.4 inch long by 1.850. That's the journal size for the rod journal. That means you have to use, it's small. You're going to have to cut your crank down pretty far, and your overlap is going to go away. So the crank strength is going to go away unless you de-stroke it. If you de-stroke it, the overlap generally remains the same, but your journal gets considerably smaller. But that is a Honda or Acura bearing size. Then you got a 0.708, which is essentially that's the wrist pin size, 708 wrist pins. That's real small. So this is what they call the piston guided rod. Okay, that's what this is. This is for a piston guided NASCAR motor to turn 11,000 RPM all day long and make 900 horsepower. And then it's got your 0.905 wide. So whatever your Mopar width is, you want to find a rod that's just as wide or wider. Okay, because you can always cut them down. You cannot easily make them wider. All right. So you look for something wider and longer. Okay. Well, it looks like maybe that might be the only combination. Here we go. Howard's Ultimate Duty Connecting Rods for a small block Chevrolet, $600. Let's see what they got here. How long are they? Okay, from HPR Engines. Where's the details? Okay, 6.4 inch rod length and 2.10 rod journal, ARP 2000 volts. These are new, never installed, detail info in pictures. Now, here's what's cool. When you get to the small block Chevrolet realm, almost any aftermarket combination deals with small block Chevrolet rods.
Yes.
Right? You buy an aftermarket crank, this might be the way to go. You might be able to get some Chinesium cheapy crank that is it's got a 2/100 rod journal size, like a Chevrolet small block, made for a small block Dodge with a 331 stroke, or the small journal for the 318. And you can use these rods and come up with a piston combination that's relatively cheap. And since you're saving $400 on rods, you could come up with something really, really interesting to use this with, right? You can afford to buy a crank with just a weird offset, or because you're going to have to get a custom set of pistons made for this, or if there's something that's already readily available, which I'm sure there is, because small block Dodge stock stroke with a Chevrolet journal is probably the first aftermarket crank made. Okay. Let's see what else there is.
If I were doing this class, I wouldn't go personally this far. I mean, this is what I've done this, and I do this for other builds. And if you're I would look at as inexpensive as possible for your
Right.
first round.
And these are expensive combinations. So trust me, that
Yeah.
this is not something that. Okay, here we go. Now we're starting to get into one. Okay, I'm gonna let you know this right now. If you find anything Speedmaster, just scoot on by. All right, that's machine work is so horrid.
You're going to spend $300 on machine work to do
Right, you're spending more in this set of rods than you would if you bought a set of Oliver rods that would just absolutely smoke these things out of a package.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Here's some manly rods. Well, that's expensive, $1,300. But well, let's see if we can find something that's a little more obscure, but yet still
Go
reasonable.
6,200, 6.2.
6.2.
Yeah, that's
6.250 rod.
There's plenty of that stuff.
Okay. It used to be Pankel. Okay, Carrillo connecting rod, 6.25 inch. Look at there's 8 rods right there, $100 or best offer. This is where you get the tickets at.
Mm-hmm.
This is where you make up the money.
And see what's good about that? That's 100 thousandths longer than factory Mopar, so that allows you to make your compression height that much shorter. So that way you can raise that pin up. So when you have your pistons made, you can have a much lighter piston at that point. That's the whole point of this.
And here's something that's like right here up front. You can see that with the cursor. Here's some Childs and Albert's aluminum rods. There's nothing saying you can't run an aluminum rod in this class. If you buy a set of cheap Childs and Albert's rods for $96, man, you can make a lot of stuff happen with machine work to make that fit. Okay, so these Carrillo rods are 6.250. The pin bore is 0.8660. So it's meant for like a sprint car or a stock car that's meant to turn a lot of RPM for a long time. The big end bore is 2 inch. It's 200. So it is the small General Chevrolet rod is what this is. So technically the ticket would be that 327 crank, this set of $100 rods, and then a custom piston to make it all work together with what you have in a regular 327 small journal block.
And here's the thing is that anything that I have that's runs NA, in fact, the engine in this car wasn't designed to run with nitrous. That's a 2-inch journal on that because there's tons of bearings for that. Anything that makes power, that's a small block like all my Gen 3 Hemi stuff, that runs a 2100 because there's an infinite amount of bearings for those, for like an LS style or, for your 350. And they're always available. So, yeah, that's exactly how I find a lot of stuff too, is exactly like that. And you can do easy setups. Even if you find that a rod that's got too big of a big end. Say you find someone who was running super stock eliminator, big block Chevrolet, it's 990 pin. He has to run a 990 pin, but he's got a 2-inch journal down here and it's a 6.3 85 rod. You can still have that big end bush down. You can send them out to like a custom place like Dyer's Rods, and they'll put a bushing in that, so that way you can run a really small, like 927 pin. So you're not really taking a hit on the weight because you're just pushing it down. So lots of things to think about.
So I'm going to jump ahead quite a bit here. And Clayton's Toolbox is saying forged crank versus cast crank. Forged is heavier but stronger. Cast is lighter but weaker. At what point do you think forged is worth it?
It's RPM for me.
Yeah, that's what's going to dictate it. See, okay, to tell you the truth, what's one's better? And this is my opinion. You can chime in here, Shane. I like cast cranks. If you think of a crankshaft as like a spring, okay, because that's really what it is. It's like a spring. The cast crank is more flexible. And the more flexible that it is, the less vibration, the less problems that you have going down, like longevity wise. But it is the RPM, because what happens is that cast crank starts to wet noodle inside the motor, right? And it ends up cracking and breaking apart. Mm-hmm. The forged crank will not do that, but it is considerably heavier. But you can turn a lot of that extra. If you're going to spend money on machine work on the crank, did you know if you cut the crank 200 thousandths under versus 10 thousandths under, it costs the same price? Okay. The forged crank is not, I don't think it's hardened on the outside like a cast. Cast crank, you can't turn 200 thousandths. You'd have to have it rehardened.
Yeah.
Okay. The forged crank, I'm not sure. I think you can.
Well, yeah, but you still have to have it rehardened. You have to have it renitrated. Yeah, because it's still hardened on the end. It's just a hardened. It's a different hardness as it goes through.
But that's a big difference for me.
Yeah, for me, it's horsepower. Like I built a lot of. I don't use the word crate engines, but I've had that recipe engine. I've sent it out to everyone here. 450 to I'm going to call it 500 horse on a 318 style cast crank, 360 cast crank. That's about where I would be, and about seven. This is the magic number, but 7,000 RPM. A cast crank is going to be just fine for that. Now, there's people who have taken way over that and survived. Yes, I'm just talking on average. You never know what you're going to get. A cast crank and a forged crank are both going to slightly jump rope, on the center mains at 7,000 and above, and you're going to get some cap lock on either one of them, unless they're center counterweighted. But the forged one will do that less at a higher RPM. So they're all both going to whip, but it's going to be less. So if you're planning on making 500 horse, and that's the reason why we went with this cubic inch deal. I was thinking people would be making right around 450 to 500 horse. So even a cast crank would work if you're going to keep it under 7,000 RPM.
That was the idea, is that you could, even if you had, let's think of worst case scenario. Worst case scenario is you had a cast crank, 2-bolt main block. You had something that had the standard stock bore in it, and you were just running a decent set of heads on a factory style motor. Okay. You could literally show up and be competitive in the class. That was the idea. You're not going to get out moneyed. You're not going to get outbuilt. We're just talking about the cheap ringer combinations that you would have, that you could put together for not a lot of money, are seriously available, right? And you could, a 331 Chevrolet small block with a good set of Vortec heads, or even set of aluminum fast burns, or even that Dart Pro 1 set, dude, you would freaking beat 90% of the people in the class, and you didn't really spend any money.
If you really want a thing to look at, I would be looking at, on a crankshaft, is your oiling system. Make sure you have plenty of oil going there. I would pay more attention to that. Get a decent set of heads. Make your rods as light as possible, even your factory ones, or just run the factory ones that are in it. And then, work on your intake and your exhaust and call it good. And then just get it to run correctly and repeatable, and work on the chassis. And you would pick up more just by doing that, I believe.
I think a car with a T55 speed and a 302 cubic inch Chevrolet small block, or even a Ford 302 and a T5, would have like leaps and bounds ahead of the rest of the cars in the class. They just got to get it done on that small tire. That's the hard thing that's going to be to do. Keith Cleary says that, Dallas, I heard you mention factory stock at Fun Ford Weekend. I used to run trophy stock in the early 2000s, had to use the factory cams, and the speed density cams were always the best on the Cam Doctor. That's what everyone always said, is that they were more consistent, in that they had a better profile, the early speed density, especially like the 86, 87, or 85, 86, 87. I think that's right. And then it went 88 was different, or maybe it was 87, 88 was different.
What you should do is jump way ahead. That's like 20 minutes back.
Yeah, and Levi is saying Ken RPM will be the killer of the crank in this class, definitely not the torque. Mm-hmm. So let's see, how far should I jump up?
I don't know. And my chat stopped working a little bit. It kind of goes there.
So Travis Mopar Garage says 318 block with a 360 crank stroke, so a 342 small block Mopar. Yeah, but that's the wrong way to do this class.
Yes.
You would want
big bore.
You want the short stroke big bore. You want to board at 318 and use the stock crank. Here you go. Tall Garage says, yep, I got some NASCAR rods for $50. Real small, big ends though. Luck my engine needed turned and had small journals. Yeah, see, and that's I've done for the past 3 motors I've done now. The one in my T-Bird was NASCAR take-out rods. Mm-hmm. So. Okay. Okay, so Dizzy says I have 340 pistons, rods, and with pins put together, and 340 cast crank if someone needs them. Sell cheap.
There you go.
There you go.
A 340 cast crank will be fine. I mean, that's good. 7,000 RPM and 500 horse is a lot in a car that's going to weigh, 340. I forget the weight. I don't have a calculator here, but that would still be a a very well good hitter and you have a tunnel ram on that thing, that would be an awesome setup.
Well, okay. 38 Racing, you guys are talking so much internal engine stuff. At this point, I'm not opening the engine up any further than I have to. So we're talking internal engine stuff because that's kind of who we are, right? Yeah. But the thing is, what you're doing there with your essentially just picking up a motor and go hammer on it, that's what both of us did in the like mid 90s to early 2000s was just pick up a motor, do what you had to be competitive, and that's it. Don't go anymore because you don't have any more money for anything else. So like even gaskets were included in your budget when you started thinking about it.
I got to tell you, I would get an engine for $79. I would tear it apart. I would use the factory rings that were in there. I would cut them, reopen them up. I would use the bearings that were in there. I would just polish the crank with 1,000 grit sandpaper, shoe polish, or WD-40. I would blueprint the pump. I would literally take the whole thing apart, and then I could get a Victor Wren's gasket kit. I think it was $190 or something like that, and it was a decent gasket that worked at that time. It was still an American place, and I was spraying 200 shot nitrous to that thing, and it would run just fine. So you can basically take your engine apart and just check everything. And then I paid really close attention to the oiling, system. You've heard me and Dallas talk about oiling on here in depth many times. I think that's going to be the main thing with these engines is that because it's a factory block, you're going to have to pay attention to the oiling. Chevrolets are going to have a little bit advantage in this area than everybody else because they have a little better oiling on the crankshafts. But the Mopars can come up really quick too, so with the Fords.
If I was starting all over, like I like this idea right here that he's doing. I mean, it's a lot less effort, and the fun level is really high. You like a 5.3 LS, you could buy a 5.3 LS. You could throw a cam in it and a tunnel ram and a set of headers, and this thing would be almost at the top of the class. It literally would be. I like Shane. I was a big proponent of Junkyard motors. I mean, I was very choosy about the ones I would go get because they used to have a special at this place. I can't remember what's the Junkyard's name. It was down on the Gulf. It was in Gulfport, Mississippi, on Canal Road, and it got blown away with Hurricane Katrina came in 2005. But I used to go there. Maybe it was Barry's You Pull It. I think that's what it was. Barry's You Pull It. Anyway, I'd go in there, and they used to always have Lincoln Mark 7. Okay, Lincoln Mark 7 came with a 5-liter HO motor, just like a Mustang 5-liter, and they had the forged pistons in them, just like a Mustang 5-liter from '86 to '92. People would, if a Mustang 5-liter came in, it would literally be a rusted Hulk within a matter of minutes. There would be so many people picking parts off of it. But the Lincoln sitting right next to it had entirely the same drivetrain and actually a better rear axle. It would sit there for months, and I'd come in and I'd pull the motor out. And if it had the idea was that you wanted one with like 140,000 miles on it, because if it had 140,000 miles on it, there was two things that's going to happen here. One, the rings, you didn't even have to open anything up, and I don't know what's going on with these balloons, but you didn't have to open anything up. Because the rings were already worn so much that they generally had like a 25,000th gap, right? Back then wasn't like that awesome of rings. It was Molly's about the best thing you were looking at. And then the other thing is when it had that many miles on it, it was already worn in. Like a 302 Ford is one of those engines that you can lean on them hard when they're already got a ton of miles on them. You can lean on them hard and they work okay because it's generally the tightness that tears them up.
Yeah,
it's because the rod's so short. The angularity of it is just freaking tremendous, right? But the more worn it is, the less angularity you have.
And that's funny you say that because I would notice I would build a new engine and it would get hot, it would overheat, it was temperamental. That's why I really focused on the wrecking yard engines because they were cheap, they were already worn in, and all I had to do was just clean it up and just look at it. Do I have something good? Awesome. Let's go beat the crap out of it because it's already ready to go.
Yeah, most of the time I didn't even run a freaking ball home through them. It was just like clean them off, and then you would clean the head gasket surface area. And you would buy, at the time, this is before MLS gaskets were like mega available. I used to go buy an engine gasket set from the Ford garage for a Ford Explorer that had like these graphite coated gaskets. They were, oh man, they were top notch. I don't think I ever blew a head gasket running nitrous on any of them, but they weren't MLS gaskets, that. So Bobby Frizzell says that a 302 with a pair of Cleveland heads, a good roller cam, and a manual transmission, that would be a fun combo. That would be pretty much a ruler in the class, especially in a Fox body like a Fairmont or something with a couple extra inches on the wheelbase over the Mustang.
Mm-hmm.
It would be a serious contender.
Yeah.
Let's see. Two Hacks Garage says a lot of hodgepodge factory parts did just about any small cube V8 can be lethal. Just need to do a bit of research. That's 100% true. Okay, so Nick the Van Man says, seems the engines I pay real money for now are worse than engines I got in junkyards 15 years ago.
Exactly. Yes, I agree with that 100%. What you need to do is go to a wrecking yard area where they have a military, like a lot of military bases. San Diego, you had the Marines, you had a Navy. You
had 4 Navy bases and 2 Marine Corps bases.
Yes, and so they were always showing up in there. At that time in the 70s and 80s and 90s, Dodge had a contract, so all the trucks and all these Cordobas, these big 4-door, sedan things where they used to, move around everybody, they all had Dodges in them. So at that time, why I went Dodge is because I could beat on a Dodge more than I could any other engine in factory trim. I couldn't afford, like really good rock arms, and a shaft mount rocker was pretty good. And then the factory, like a 273 rocker arm, which is like the ductile iron one, man, those things were adjustable. You could beat the crap out of them, man. I ran a set of those things for almost 10 years on a 250 kit of nitrous. It was just awesome. I was shipping that thing at 7,500 RPM sometimes.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about, like, what I thought would be really cool that I've never seen anybody do is, like, how you got like your vacations to go to car stuff like cruising the coast and all that. Like, we could pack up. If you guys don't know this, at the end of No Name Nationals every year, I pack up and I leave and I go to the Gulf Coast, and I do cruising the coast and watch the Southeast Gassers at Gulfport Dragway every year, and I take my boy along. It would be cool to have a destination like that where what you do is you pack up and everybody hauls to like the junkyards in Southern California, or hit the ones in Florida and Jacksonville, because the Navy base is there and they got tons of cars, just like you're saying, where it's like cars get left behind, or you got the contract cars from the government. They're just stacked with them like cordwood, and it would be cool to go to one of those places and just do it'd be like a junkyard crawl for a vacation. I think it would be kind of cool. I would sign up for something like that.
Yeah, that would be fun. I would like to go more to like a higher desert area place too, where there was a military base, because some of those things would just be sitting there in like nearly perfect condition.
I tell you what, well, Tom Brown is on here, and I bet you up in Nodak in North Dakota, there used to be a bunch of military installations up there, especially for Air Force, because that used to be the perimeter for the ballistic missile stuff, right? And I'm certain that would be like the high plains, but the winter up there is so bad, they don't even salt the road most of the time because it's so dang bad. Like, you just don't go anywhere. But okay, so Dead Pedal Motors, before aftermarket parts became easier to get, I remember doing a lot of factory spec checking to see what factory parts would liven the motors up, especially Mopar stuff.
Yep.
My father used to run stock eliminator with a Buick. Okay. He would go to the junkyard and he would buy every shaft rocker that they had for a Buick. Every single one of them. And then, because they're all interchangeable, essentially. You can put 350 rockers on a 455. But he would take every single one and check the ratio of it, right? Exactly. And he would have piles, like 5-gallon buckets of rocker arms that he was just throwing away to find the one that had the 1.63 ratio on it, right?
Yeah.
And, but that's how people used to do it before you had all of the aftermarket backing.
That's so funny you said that, because every single Chrysler one, the stamp steel ones that say 1.5 rocker arm ratio, they're actually like 1.35, 1.4. They're not even close to 1.5.
Yeah, that's how the Buick ones are.
and the reason why I went with those ductile iron ones out of the 273 is because they were actually 1.51 on average as far as the rocker arm ratio. So it was better.
Well, you saw the ones I did for my super stock Buick. I think I showed you those.
Yeah.
Those were 430 rockers. I have 4 different sets of 430 rockers, and they're all the same. They're all interchangeable with 350 rockers and everything, but I weighed every single one, and I found all the lightest ones, and then I found the ones with the highest ratio, right?
Perfect.
And so it was like, all right, this is the ticket right here. Excuse me. Okay. Let's see. Man, okay. What else did we have a year in review? I'm trying to think of what we did. Oh, well, I did the 300 Buick in JT Burgess's 65 Buick Special. I don't think I did. We might not have talked about that. Let's see. Clint's Street Machine. Oh, well, I'll talk about Clint's Street Machines way back in like May or June. Clint Street Machines came over here, and we ended up putting a 300 Buick in his S10 pickup, Project S10, and we use in the video when the intro video where it shows me like with my Suburban in the background, I'm tuning on this carburetor. That's a 300 Buick on the stand, and that was the mule motor was made out of leftover parts. That engine with some spray bombing ended up in Clint's S10 for the No Name Nationals. So
is that the one I got? We all donated a shit ton of parts too.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So we another thing we talked about all year was carburetors. So I'm going to show a carburetor here real quick. See if I can bring it into view. But this is a Predator carb.
Yeah, they look pretty cool.
Yeah, so it's they call it the Magic Box. Now these ones are actually, this has got an extended bowl. This is the one downfall of a Predator is that they only typically have, they don't have this one here. They just have this. So they only have one fuel inlet, and it's a variable Venturi, like 330 CFM to like 900 and something. And so it's variable Venturi. So this right here varies with air demand, and that's your fuel. And then it's got a bell crank on the bottom right here that opens up. And then these butterflies here on the other ones, these open up with air demand. And it goes right onto a cam, and the cam is what, and you set a spring on there, and as the spring opens up, it allows more meters fuel. Now, they work really good for like on superchargers because they mix well for that. Here's the one problem with them. They don't really have a really good idle circuit. So getting them to idle is probably not the best, but yeah, so I got a couple of these things. So I'm excited because I love Predators. So I've always wanted, I got 2 of them. I'm going to put one up in for like display because I like carburetors, and one I'm going to get running. And here's the ultimate plan with it is that next time we do a dyno test with a carburetor, I'm going to put this on our, when I'm at Edelbrock, I'm going to put one of these Predators on there and just see how well it does compared to something else that we know what it does with like a 650, a 750, and our 850.
Like a VRS.
Yeah, I'm going to put it up against a VRS and see what happens.
So Bobby Frizzell says that I still junkyard crawl for parts. The engine that's in my Galaxy now is the first engine I've really bought high-end parts for. This is the kind of stuff that I really like. Bobby and I are kind of the same, I don't know, cut from the same cloth. I always like building stuff out of something that nobody else has. Like you have to make it yourself. That's real hot rodding. Agreed. When you just open up a catalog and buy something, that's not hot rodding. That is buying parts and putting them on, right? Making something, understanding how it works, and then making something is true hot rodding. And that's the things that I really do enjoy. I like. Okay. Dead Pedal Motor says the bottom end of my 302 is as stock as I can get from 1970. Okay. Bear Rose Garage says 3.5-inch header collector, big block Ford home style header, glass pack idea, reduced to 2 3/4 inside the 3.5-inch pipe, perforate and wrap in fiberglass for 2 feet with tip out, going for the AC Cobra sound and effect. Cool. Well, that would do it.
Yeah.
The Mercruiser 3-liter have stupid wide rods. I've been trying to find a rod using the Dallas method for a while with no luck. It sometimes it just takes
Just
it
takes
really
time.
just takes patience. Yeah, you just gotta like don't get frustrated. Eventually, just be persistent about it, and eventually you'll find what you're looking for or something that's relatively close.
Yeah. Indirect Connection says something amazing. I'm going to say this real quick because this follows along with what Tall Garage says. I like oddball engines. It makes you become an engine builder, not an engine assembler. That's the best quote of the day because that's the exact truth. That's the reason why I really gravitated toward the Slant Sixes is because there's not really parts for them to make to do what I'm doing with them as far as trying to get 30 miles per gallon on them at 70 miles an hour and do what I do with them. It takes thought, just like Dallas with his Buicks. It's the same thing. You're taking a thought process that's not normally done and making it work. So I agree with that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I thought that was the quote of the day.
Well, and Deadpool Motors says here someone had that in a meme the other day. A Predator carburetor said that was the final boss of carburetors. So that's your final boss.
It's a good. If tuned right, I had these on a jet boat. I had not these exact ones, but I had a pair of tunnel rams on a 454 jet boat that I had back in the early 2000s, and it worked great for that. They're not really good at part throttle. They like load. They are the like idling when they're slapped close, or like about 2,500 and up. They don't really like that mid range too much. They like a lot of load.
Let's see here. Bobby Frizzell says the VRS will donkey stomp that
Yes, it
Predator.
will. I just want to see how bad it is.
Let's see. Dizzy Izzy says that several told me that the cut down dual plane intake would idle rough. Idles great and sounds raspy. I don't know what he means by cut down dual plane.
I think he's talking about the little channel in the center of it.
Oh,
Yeah, I really wouldn't cut it down much. There's a guy who's done this, and we've tested it all before. Now, every engine is different, wave tuning and so on and so forth. It really comes down to this. If you don't even really cut it down, if you just put an open hole spacer on the top of it, it actually picks up everything that you would gain by cutting all that stuff and making all the shavings. So just put an open spacer on top of the 1 inch, and that just picks up power everywhere. In fact, every time we do a carburetor test, if it doesn't really get to what we want, we just put an open hole. If it's a tunnel ram, or like say a single plane, we put a 4-hole spacer that's tapered, or if it's a dual plane, you put an open spacer, and it will always pick up power, torque, and horsepower.
well, I did it on my super stock intake manifold. I cut that center divide down an inch. I bull nosed it, and then put an inch spacer on it. So it's got technically it's like 2-inch open. It actually works more like a single plane, I think, than a dual plane at this point.
Yeah.
But,
Well, you're making bigger plenum volume. The whole idea is making a
it's all
plenum volume
shared. That's the big
so
one.
that way it's shared. Exactly.
Yeah. So Tall Garage says Merc Cruiser 3-liter crank fits in the 2.5-liter Iron Duke with a Super Duty 4 head. Woof, gonna need all the hard block. Dude, there was a guy at Sykeston. Let's see, when it was owned by Larry Jeffers way back in the day. They still have it, I think. There's a race there once a year called, dang it, it's an old-timey race. I can't remember what it's called. It's an old-timey race. It's kind of like your UFO drags or whatever you want to call it. It's a vintage drag race. And the first year that happened, I went there because I was still running the AHRA and I was selling merch. And there was a guy there had a dragster, a front-engine dragster, and it had the Merc Cruiser 3-liter on it, but it also had Hillborn injection. It had a custom cam in it, gear drive, and got rid of the chain. It was also like 13 or 14 to 1 compression. And I never really heard one run, how potent they could be. But this thing was no joke. And I mean, it would wind up so hard what was weird is that low RPM, it didn't sound like it sounded like a regular 4-cylinder. This didn't have any beans. Man, did that sucker come alive above like 3,500. Golly, it sung and it sounded amazing. So I do love those things. Let's see, Dylan's Backyard Performance. Also, don't get caught up in building the car where it never gets done and you don't make it. It's much more respectable to show up and go down the track than not show up at all. Yeah, you're totally right there.
That's why this class is perfect, because 90% of you guys have a car that can pretty much fit into this already. That was the whole idea of this.
Okay. Bobby Frizzell says, so in a class I raced and we were only allowed a one spacer and had to run a dual plane intake. So I cut the divider down 3/4 of an inch to make basically a taller spacer. That's the exact same class and reasons I did the mine that way, Bobby, was because you couldn't get enough. Like you were forced to use, well, first they allowed you to run a single plane. So I bought a single plane that was $600. And then I took a beating on it when they got rid of the single plane. And then I had to go find a dual plane. And since it was during COVID, they didn't have any and everything was backed up. So I ended up buying a motor that had the dual plane on it. Then I got the dual plane intake manifold, had to sell the motor that no one wanted. And oh gosh, what a mess. Let's see. But yes, I did the same thing. Okay, so Tall Garage, they had a dual red cam heads for the Iron Duke. I heard they made nearly 500 horsepower NA. I don't doubt that. That thing, I'm telling you, I'd never heard one run before. And when they got it up over like 3,500, it would sing. It would literally sing. And it sounded like, like a performance engine. When you get a 4-cylinder or a 6-cylinder that runs really well, and it's a well thought out combo, like a Jaguar 6-cylinder, 3.8 liter 6-cylinder. I know why those guys love those Jags from the 60s and in the early 70s. It's because the thing has this sound to it that doesn't sound like anything else. And I think Shane hit it last week. It's like it works like a 180-degree header or a flat plane crank because you're firing at an even space all the way around and there's never an overlap, right? And I think that's why. But 4-cylinders and 6-cylinders, they have their own unique sound when wound up. But they do sound performance oriented when you got one that's right and they get up at 3,500, $4,000, they sound good. Let's see. 38 Racing says so much more fun to race a slow car fast than a fast car slow. So I've been told. And that's this all the time. Well, that's what this whole 333 class was. Like we made you carry so much weight that it was kind of irrelevant to have 9 zillion horsepower. We made the engines fairly small so that if you did decide to go to 9 zillion horsepower, it would hurt you really bad in the performance of the car because it really needed the torque is what it needed to run good in the class. It doesn't help if you got 500 horse and 260 foot-pounds of torque, anything below 4,500, because the car will never leave. You run an 1/8 mile. So you need something with some good torque.
Hey, how many times we said this, Dallas, that we had so much more fun when we were like racing a slower car. You're still looking at each other, grabbing the gears, and it's not like a 5-second deal. It's it's like a 7 or 8 second deal, or maybe even 14 seconds. When yeah, exactly.
That's the most fun I ever had racing is when I would show up with my slicks in the trunk, or the back seat, and I would go to the track. I would bolt them on, and then I would have a hell of a day at the track. And then whenever win, lose, or draw, put my stuff back in the car, put my street tires back on, and then head out. That was the most fun I ever had at the track.
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely.
So Dead Pedal's out. So we'll see you later, Dead Pedal.
Jeez, man.
Indirect Connection says, I'm strange enough. I want to see a gutted mail truck with a 500 horsepower Iron Duke going down the track.
That'd be awesome. I would like to see that too.
Let's see. Bear Rose says 2 days ago I seen an 86 Honda Magna V65 for $800. It was rough but runs good. And was thinking rear engine mini dragster. I wanted to build one of those like 15 years ago. They had this. There might still be a website. I haven't looked it up. Maybe we should go together and look that up. It's called motorcycledragster.com.
I wanted to buy one of the junior dragsters, that someone was getting rid of, and then put in a real engine into it, like a street bike engine into it, and that would be awesome.
I don't think they have it anymore. Maybe I'm doing this wrong. But oh no, they don't have it anymore. But there used to be a whole entire web page dedicated to just that,
Yeah.
which I thought was pretty neat. Motorcycle dragsters. They had little dragsters that had motorcycle motors in the back, but they also had funny cars and some altered some guys had made. And I was like, man, that's the ticket. And so like when I started doing AHRA, what I wanted to do was replace Junior Dragster because I didn't like where people were unwilling to slow the kids down. Like they weren't willing to say, oh, my kid needs to go slower because it's getting too unsafe.
It's out of hand.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So I wanted to put everybody in one of those motorcycle dragster kind of deals. But my ticket was this. I was going to make it look like a gasser, and the class was going to look like a gasser. And what we're going to use is the mini. Have you seen the mini stock cars that look like the old? I can't remember what they're called. The Legends cars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you just make a simple chassis that everybody has the same chassis, and you just put one of them bodies on there, and you make it look like a 39 Ford, or you make it look like a 41 Willys, or whatever. But it's a Legends body, and you can buy them cheap used, and you can buy them new. And they're not too bad either because they're made to be tore up at the circle track, right? But that was the idea. But make it a class where you could have anybody from like say 12 to 30 in the class. I mean, there would be no real age limit on it. It's just it would dip down to 12. 12-year-old could be in the class. I thought that would be kind of cool. And then what you do is you limit them on whatever engine. Like what I would do, what I think would be really the ticket for that, if you did something like that. You do a Sportster 883 engine. A Sportster is not worth jack crap after like 2 years. Yeah. The bottom falls out on them. And they make those 883s. They probably still make the damn things.
They do.
But
yeah.
You can buy them cheap as dirt and then, use the Sportster 883 V-twin. And then they sound cool. But, okay. Oh, Fab Race Mod repeats says there was a rear engine dragster around here with a Volvo Penta 4-banger with Boss 429 head and a small blower. It ran its butt off, and from the one side, it looked like it had a complete Boss engine on it.
That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
What's funny is, all right, so Max Witch Dick Dashley says, I was bummed out when I heard a V10 engine the first time. I expected more.
I agree.
Yeah. I was at the junkyard yesterday. I had to get a 4.3 distributor for my S10. And, dude, I ended up, there was only 2 in the whole yard. Both of them looked like hammered dog shit. I mean, they were rusted and falling apart. And I'm like, God, I want to use something like that. So I decided to hit the full-size truck section because sometimes Chevrolet put the 4.3 in the full-size truck, right? That was like the base engine. There was a Dodge V10 truck back there, like a 93 or 4 Ram. It had like that big V10 in it, 4-wheel drive. And I thought, golly, how cool would that be to just snag that and use it in something? But I mean, can you even buy parts for it? I don't know. I know it's like a 360. It's a V10 version of a 360.
Yeah, that version is, yes. That version is, yes.
But isn't that similar to what they used in the Viper?
The first generation, yes. But after that, it diverged really quick.
Did it really? Okay.
Yeah, the heads went different. I mean, basically, it's still a V10, firing order about the same, but the heads, the crank, the rods, everything diverged from that rapidly.
Huh.
That's why if you see some of these Vipers and the later generations, they're really making some really stupid horsepower, like 4,500 horse or whatever it is that they're making out of these things now. Those guys are running that 40 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour to 150, where they do the roll racing. Yeah, there's some guys out there making stupid power with those Vipers for that reason, because they went away from that whole.
Oh, the truck motor.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Well, let's see. Bobby Frizzell is out of here. Been great, guys. I don't have a great weekend. Hey, Merry Christmas. We won't see you again until next year. So Levi's Backyard Performance says they used to have a junior comp, Shane. It was for older kids, but the engines were like GSXR 1000s.
I didn't know that. I really thought I was thinking of something that'd be fun for like me. So it sounds great because, that'd be fun.
Bear Rose Garage says it's a class you could easily do on a real guy budget. That was kind of the idea. Is I wanted to replace Junior Dragster with that, but you could still have kids running the class, but they're not stupid ultimatum fast, right? I mean, you're talking about something that I also thought about doing it electric too, but there's no sound to it, and that's what kind of sucks. But I thought about doing it electric, like different than everybody's thinking electric cars. I was thinking like use a starter motor from a semi truck as the main power, and then you virtually just have a speed controller with a 12-volt battery. That was it. Nothing more horrendous than that. But I also came to the conclusion, like, you know how like the bottom was falling out of the malls, like Amazon had actually crushed the malls so bad that the malls were all closing up around the United States, right? Well, I had this freaking epiphany. If I could find somebody that really wanted to invest in the AHRA, I'd go buy up all the old malls, and I'd do those electric legend body cars inside the mall. Then the weather's controlled. No more wind, no more rain, no more rainouts, no more issues. It's all controlled inside the mall with the air conditioning going, the whole 9 yards. You put your food there. You get one food vendor, and then you get your T-shirts and stuff all in one spot. Everything. It's all set up, ready to go. It's got bathrooms, the whole 9 yards. I thought it'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
But you just had to buy an old mall. Okay. Okay, Danny Boyd says Viper V10 is different from the one in trucks.
Yeah. We all know that. That's there's 100%.
Okay, 30 Racing says, I bet the V10 Dodge had a hole in piston number 7 or 9.
That's correct. He's exactly
right. They like the burn pistons?
Yeah, I forget exactly which cylinder it is, but there's 2 times where the 2 cylinders fire. That's why it sounds funny, is because there's 2 cylinders firing at 2 times, because it's still a quarter turn of the crankshaft or something firing. So that's why it sounds like a tractor. But yeah, they're notorious for that. Burn up, put holes and shit.
Huh. Dallas, you're saying you're not a multi-billionaire. I never knew. Yeah. LOL, I wish I was. I don't know when I was running the AHR what everybody had an impression of me, but I was like literally a regular dude trying to do something for the common guy. And I don't live lavish. I don't have anything nice. And now I'm gonna have half that. But oh well, I live below my means, and I'll still have something that comes out there and knocks everybody's socks off. Michael Robert Embry says, any PRI updates, new parts, surprises?
There was a lot of cool stuff. I would say probably the biggest thing we released was the supercharger that Dave was working on, I think, in the DLC coded lifters. As far as our end, I was basically really in meetings most of the time, believe it or not, and I was looking at cranks and rods and competition and so on and so forth. But I think the coolest thing is I went to Don Schumacher Racing, and they were running one of their crate engines there, and it was like I think it was 1,500 horse, basically a Gen 3 Hemi factory block, and it was pretty cool to see someone else's build make that kind of power when we do it ourselves. So it was that was kind of cool. But I was only there for literally one full day and half of another day, and I drove home Friday night because I wanted to be back home.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, I didn't go. Like, I didn't go to anything like that, PRI or nothing. I think the newest thing that I've seen here recently is what? The Super Turbine 300 is not a Turbo 350 variant. It's also not a Power Glide variant. So it's its own thing. So I need to just ditch a bunch of Super Turbine 300s and then keep my converters and turn them into Super Turbine 400 setups. So that's about it. Let's see. Oh, so 38 Racing is saying it's an induced spark due to 7 and 9 plug wires routed next to each other. There's a service bulletin on it.
Yeah.
So I guess they would fire out of order and cause detonation in those 2 cylinders. Yeah. My stomach is not happy. Okay, Bear Rose Garage says, harmonically speaking, it's better to go V12 than V10 to even out the firing order. V10s are like the 5-cylinder engines in that aspect. And that's where, the 6-cylinder, we talked about it, is 6 in a row is pretty much like the perfect combination to divide up 360 degrees, right? Because you get every 60 degrees, something fires. That's why it has that weird sound to it, the overlap.
Yeah, and also too, I mean, it really comes down to what kind of crank you're going to be running on the V10, also, because is it going to be something that's you're going to have two cylinders firing, or is it going to be firing so that way there's something firing every turn, like there's not two cylinders firing at any given time. Um, so if you're doing a V10 where there's not something firing every single time, you basically get either one, the V12 or the V10. Once they get up in RPM, it's hard to distinguish the two. They both sound pretty good. Yeah, but I like personally, if I had to pick, I would go with the V12s just because of the balance. Oh,
well, Danny Boyd's saying 2 balanced inline sixes versus 2 vibrating inline fives.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say because it would be smoother. The V12 would definitely be smoother. You would need any counterbalances for the V12.
All right. Yeah. So you got it there. Fab Race Mon Repeat. That was like the big picture thing, that if I could ever get the thing off the ground and make it work, that's where we were going. We're going mall racing with electric motored Legends cars, because you can be inside or you can run them off propane. So I was trying to figure out which to do and how to do it, but it was all going to take some engineering and crafting and fabricating and fun stuff, just thinking outside the box. But you need deep pockets to figure that stuff out. So, let's see. Tall Garage says that there's some madman made a V12 with 2 JZ heads. Oh, that's pretty awesome right there. That thing would be fast.
Google it. I think it's on YouTube.
Danny Boyd says mall racing on souped up mobility scooters would be cool too. That would be kind of cool, actually. But all right. Well, man, I guess we're wrapping up the night, huh? This is it for 2024. We don't have any more. We've talked DLC lifters, Super Turbine 300. I didn't say switch pitch, so you got it right at the end of the show.
There you go.
Let's see here. What else did we talk about? 333 class. And we will have rules ready to go for December the 27th for John's live. I don't know if it's going to be me or Professor P doing it, or both of us, or neither of us, or just John doing it, or whatever. Or we're just going to post them on Facebook. I really don't know yet, because I have somewhere I have to be on the 27th. So, like, not even in the same state as me. So it's going to be kind of hard. And Professor P's kind of in the same boat.
Yeah, I'm going to Dallas. I was telling you guys, I got my buddy brother's Volkswagen running. I'm going to be going there right after Christmas. And now he's been driving a little time. We're going to tune it up, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Okay. So the next live for us is going to be on the 8th. That would be the Wednesday after.
Okay, January the 8th. Michael Schmidt saying, what's the AHRA up to for next year? I don't know yet. I don't go to divorce court until February the 3rd. So February the 3rd is probably the soonest I can have an idea of how my life is going to be afterward. So then I can't make plans until after that. So and I'm assuming February the 3rd is going to be filled with a lot of drinking and self-abuse. So I don't know. I won't be thinking about AHRA. But I could say the best possibility I can give you is that we'll probably run a 2026 season if I can afford to do the season. It depends what happens. I don't know. Everything's up in the air. I don't even know where I'm going to be living. So,
and this is just something to think about. Not saying it's true, but this is me talking to you guys to push Dallas to do this. If this 331 class or this Triple Crown class is awesome in 2025. Who knows? 2026, there might be more tracks. Just a thought. Let's just make that
more
happen.
Races with that class.
More tracks with more races with that class. So, and it would be fun. So,
yeah. Don't forget to visit John Wilbert on Friday, and then immediately after Tony's Hot Rod Garage. Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday is Buffdale Campo and Kim, where they do just car picks.
It's cool, man. It's fun. I it's hard for me to tune in because I'm on my phone, but sometimes I'll just let it play and I'll just sit there and laugh while I'm doing something else. But it's fun, it's entertaining. So
yeah, and we love you all for stopping by for this 2024 year in Wednesday Night Tech Talk, and we hope to see you in 2025. But
hey, one more
with that-
time, Buff Del Campo said he's actually be doing a Christmas Eve show. So there you go. So he's going to be doing it. So he will be on for Christmas Eve on Tuesday.
Okay.
So there you go. Go check him out.
Okay. Well, we will see you later. Bear Rose is wishing me the best. And so we will see you next year. We're out.
Yeah, you guys take it easy.